Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cerulean Arts Gallery and Studio. Today we have Pia De Girolamo here for a talk about her current exhibition on view September 13th to October 8th. Hello, Pia.
Hi, Mike.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
How tell us about your show, yourself and your show.
Sure. So, Bodies in Motion and Sometimes at Rest is the name that I gave it. And it's the first show of figurative series of paintings. I had previously considered myself mainly a landscape painter. I'd been able to travel and see some pretty cool places and translated them into my paintings. But as so many artists during the pandemic, when we weren't traveling, I kind of had to change gears a little and I actually started doing a floral series, which I presented last year, but also at the same time, when things started opening up again, I started working on the figurative series. The um, the reason being, I think I was really drawn to the people I was close to and friends, family, and just um, also expressing the joy of movement, the energy, freedom of motion of the figure. And that was appealing to me. Um, so I began uh, to really focus on the figure. And it's not like I've never painted the figure or drawn the figure before. I had over the years. And here, for example, actually, but what I was going to say is, but I really started focusing in and doing a series that I could present as a body of work. So these two paddle boarders are actually inspired by my own experience in St. Lucia. Was the first trip we took when the lockdown sort of opened up. Then we started traveling again. Those are the Piton Mountains in the background. And I learned how to paddleboard. I had tried to surf many years ago. That didn't go very well, but paddleboarding I was able to do, and I just love that feeling of skimming on the water and propelling myself. And these are sort of two iterations of a figure. Um, Paddle boarding in a tropical environment in, as I said, the Piton Mountains in the background, but also the hot colors and the beautiful blues of the ocean. And anyway, there's that sense of freedom, sort of in contrast with what we were doing during the lockdown and hibernating and not going anywhere.
So, Pia, are
Um,
you working from what sort of references are you using?
Well, in the terms in those two paddle boarders were that's just memory, sort of muscle memory too. This figure, however, is from a photograph that I took and of my husband actually. So all my models really are friends and family. And this one, this is the body. The other was the bodies in motion. This is sometimes at rest. Sort of the balance to motion, contemplation, action versus contemplation. And here is another seaside scene, but in this case, he's barefoot and looking out over the ocean at light in the distance and just resting and soaking it in, soaking it up. And um, but again, outside and sort of unconstrained. Um, so that's so the ones on the left are really from memory and imagination. And then you'll see others as well that I've worked from photographs. This one, interesting, as I mentioned before, this is a pretty large one. As I mentioned before, I have over the years worked on figurative paintings, and this painting I started 10 years ago, and it was part of a group of paintings, that very large paintings that I did after a trip to Venice, and spending some time with my family and my sister's family, also out on the water. And we went swimming in the lagoon there. Now, the lagoon is the natural part, not the Grand Canal. This is where it's very sort of wild, and there's marshes, and so it, beautiful water and so on. So this was, again, sort of from memory, from imagination. This is could be myself and my sister, but really more a kind of an imagined scene of us. I didn't have a picture, and the figures are a whole lot younger than we were even 10 years ago. So it could be, two sisters swimming.
So
But
did you say you started this 10 years ago?
I did. I
Yeah.
started it 10 years ago, and I never finished it, and I pulled it out.
Yeah, I was wondering about it because the surface is more heavily worked than
Yes.
once.
Yes. And yeah, and so I do have, I think I have some modeling paste in there, and I work in acrylics. And yes, so I finished it this year, in 2023. Um, it was only, I had never finished it, so I was just inspired with the whole figurative series, kind of in the middle of the series, or towards the end, really, to pull it out and work on it. So that's yeah. And I have a few more of these big ones. That's about like 55 by 63 or something, like
So
around.
what's it like pulling out a painting from, out some time ago and then assessing it
You
now?
know, it's really interesting. I mean, I still liked I still in I thought, this is a good start. Yeah, I kind of was really amazed because, as I said, I kind of considered myself more of a landscape painter, but I pulled out this one, and as I said, I have a number of others in this grouping that I never showed, mostly finished, a few that need some tweaking. And I realized, I actually was sort of surprised that I hadn't continued. So it was surprising, but also satisfying, and also very satisfying that I could finish it in a similar enough way
Mhm.
to complement the other work that I had done in the series, from, more current, that were more current.
Mhm. So here's another one of your large pieces.
So this piece, actually, interestingly enough, is also a few years older, and this was really part of my Rome series, which was shown at Cerulean
Yeah.
Arts a few years ago. But once again, the main subject of that series was the urban landscape, buildings. And in all of the paintings that were presented in that show, there were all buildings. But this is a real place, but again, more from imagination. So this is a park in the northern part of Rome, called the Villa Ada. There was a villa, a mansion, I guess that's part of it, but the whole park is a park is often referred to as a villa. So Parco della Villa Ada, and that is imagining me sitting in the park with my sketchbook and looking at the scene. So I may have had maybe a photo or a series of photos of some of the umbrella pines or a little bit of the, the terrain of the park. But essentially, it's an imagined scene or a composite scene of an artist, let's say, but inspired by me, looking over at the scene and having sketched or about to sketch. And that's the and it was never shown with that grouping
Right.
because it was singular. As I said, I had done the figure sporadically over the years, so I thought, what a that it would go with this grouping. So yeah.
And then it's flanked by two new pieces, yes?
Yes, and the two new pieces, the model is is Ainsley Jameson, who is my son's my younger son Chris's girlfriend, and she is an athlete, and she is very tall, and she's very confident, and she moves with grace and conviction, and I've asked her one day, hey, just can you pose for me, and can you do some moves, do some like dance moves or whatever, just do whatever you want. And I took lots of pictures of her, and I also had her pose for me seated in a chair. So this was one of her poses where she just flung her arms out, and I loved it, and I painted it so in a very loose way. And the she was like in front of the door, and I liked how the light came through the transom and the sides there too. So
Do you
and then,
consider them portraits?
well, not exactly of otherwise, but they're based on someone that I know, that I love, that, and so I think in the sense they retain the energy and the way the body moves of that person. So, but obviously you can't look at the face here and say, oh yes, this is this person. However, if you knew that person, you would know who this is. But I think but I purposely abstracted her because for me that it was interesting to render the shapes of the body, the movement of the body, more than um, necessarily an accurate rendering of her face. I actually have done portraits, very closely observed, very representational portraits of some of my models, but for this show, I wanted to show the abstracted figure.
So the way you're treating these, I mean, you're very simplifying the forms, and it becomes like a color shapes. Are you thinking of like any contemporary or modern painters as you do this?
Yeah, sure. And also I guess there's also a reference to my landscape work, which
Right,
in a way, this is one of a sort of a continuation of that, because the way I was working my landscapes was again with a simplification of form and attention to the form, play of color and so
right,
on, as opposed to rendering an very accurate photographic landscape.
right.
In terms of the other influences, Fairfield Porter has always been an influence, or is someone I've been attracted to his figure work. Alice Neal is another person that I admire her work. There's a contemporary artist named Catherine Bradford who is I have an affinity with her work. And there's also an artist, Barclay Hendricks, if I wasn't aware of him, but I became aware of him as I was doing the series, and other artists mentioned his name. And so those are some of the people that I'm drawn to looking at.
Mhm.
And there's always Matisse,
Right.
and yeah, big one. So,
And
and
this
this is,
fisherwoman.
yes, this is Ainsley again. Again, but representation of a woman who's, we were on a fishing trip, and there, she is grappling with, she's just gotten this fish out of the water, and she's holding on to it because it's going to be wriggling and slipping out of her fingers in a minute. So she's bracing herself with her one leg against the back of the boat, or the side of the boat, and the one. And again, like, what interested me was just that rendering the strength, the bracing, that the body is doing. And also, if you notice, I like the tension between shape and line. And so I left the leg in the front as outlined. It was interesting. Now, you can fill that in and cover over that dark, but I liked it. It made this statement, and it kind of anchors the figure even more. So in these paintings, if you can see, I explore line versus form and shape, and try to have an interplay between them.
Well, you can see it's like you're thinking. The drawing is your thinking, the traveling line shows you rendering the form.
Yes.
So it's a
And
record of your thought.
yes. And some of it I do intuitively, and then I kind of step back and say, do I want to leave this here or not? So the thinking might come in afterwards, but yeah, so it becomes, then it goes from intuitive to consciously leaving a mark,
Mhm.
the mark making. So
So this one's a little bit different. It's got a little more of a setting to it, like the figure in a scene.
yes, this was also based on a photograph of a friend, going, looking at rocks or shells in shallow water. And I have, in most of these, there's not much background. I've purposely simplified the background, but the background was so beautiful that it's, and the colors in the water and seaweed and rocks, that though I focused on the figure, I did work a little bit more with texture and color to have a little bit more of a scene. And it just depends from painting to painting what moves me. And in here I also used a lot more texture. This is painted on a panel, which I prepared. And sometimes different surfaces just lend themselves to more to different effects, and I just liked the way the texture was working on this piece.
When it's a much smaller painting, it's more intimate.
Yes, yeah. And it's a Seaside Treasures. Again, it's someone I know, but it's all of us, when we're at the beach and we're looking for, that perfect shell or some interesting piece of sea glass, or, a beautiful rock. And yeah, so it's midway between motion and contemplation there.
Mhm.
So, and this is also based on a photograph. And again, an abstracted painting of one of my sons, my younger son, who is going hiking. And it also is a metaphor for me. And I called it Upward because it's that it just has that, you know, uplifting, go forward, let's go, you know, let's make it through, resiliency, you know, strength, enjoying the outdoors. And this one has a bit more of a setting as well, because in the photograph there were boulders, rocks in the background, and I enjoyed like painting or looking at the different shapes and contrasts. So I worked the background a little bit more because I was interested in those abstracted natural shapes.
You're using very cool blue colors here.
Yeah, part of it was, you know, the local color of the painting, of what he was wearing, but also I just wanted to work monochromatically. In a lot of the simpler backgrounds, I have a monochromatic sort of flat background. And in this, although it's not flat, I continued that sort of monochrome feeling to kind of get that same sense of uh, it's not quite flat, but that, you know, a sense of simplifying the background, although it's a little bit more complex than say the next one. So
It's quite a contrast to.
yeah, yeah. And you know, this is the thing. There are times when I am drawn, it depends. I don't like making every single painting the same. I like having a theme or having an interest like the figure, but placing having the freedom to do it slightly differently. So, you know, I could have painted that hiker with a completely blue flat background, but I didn't want to.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have some variety.
Yeah. So
I mean, they
this,
have the two of them together, they have very different feelings since the one has a setting and the other is much more graphic.
yeah.
The runner.
And I am a sometime printmaker, so I have this affinity for graphic
Yeah.
design as well. And so sometimes I'll, you know, that's what I'll do. So this one, that's him again, the hiker, my son Chris, who is again, this is he's running, and I loved the strength of the figure. And in this case, it I think the background emphasizes, you know, makes the figure pop. And it's just, I love the contrast. And again, here you'll see the line against that play of line and form. And as well as the different, you know, the striking color contrasts. But yeah, I enjoy playing with that drawing and painting. I love to draw, and it's really interesting when you combine the two of those things.
And so there's another one in this similar vein, the
Right,
boarding
right.
on green. So we'll come back to that one.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned it is that these two, the runner on orange and wakeboarding on green, and this is my older son, was the model, and that's from a photo as well. These were done at the same time. So I like to work on multiples, and so these two paintings were definitely done with the same idea, with at roughly the same time, and with that same graphic style of the very striking flat background, and you know, the drawing versus color. And so I just wanted to show you that when I work on let's say two things at the same time, then they usually mesh and
right?
are
Like,
closer in style.
like companion piece.
Companion pieces, exactly, exactly. So,
Well, great. So we'll end here.
all
Thank you so
right,
much again. And the show is up through October 8th. So we hope
okay,
people come down and check it
yeah,
out.
yeah.